Hello, welcome to the second video in Module 3, Assessing Language Knowledge. In these lectures, we are going to find out what lexical knowledge is and how can we assess vocabulary by task. Words are the basic building blocks of a language. We use them to create sentences, larger paragraphs, and whole text. As native speakers, we rapidly acquire vocabularies in childhood, and this development continues as we encounter new experiences and concepts. But for the second language learner, the process is demanding, sometimes requiring a more conscious effort. Some second language learners make a steady attempt to enlarge their vocabulary, jotting down and memorizing lists of words or relying on their bilingual dictionaries to overcome the vocabulary or lexical gaps in their knowledge. For others, vocabulary acquisition seems to occur more naturally, the byproduct of a knack for automatic language processing. Language researchers and teachers recognize that vocabulary knowledge is integral to overall second language ability and are now focusing on ways to teach vocabulary and also assess the knowledge of vocabulary. So, what does it mean to know a vocabulary item? One way to answer this question is to try to clarify everything a learner has to do to acquire a vocabulary item, or in other words, the vocabulary ability. According to Checker in 1994, 3 components make up the definitions of vocabulary ability are the content of vocabulary use, vocabulary knowledge and fundamental processes, metacognitive strategies for vocabulary use. 1. Vocabulary in context. Traditionally in testing, we view context as a sentence or environment in which the target word occurs. However, from a communicative language use position, context is more than just the linguistic environment in which a word occurs. It also includes different types of pragmatic knowledge. That is, the meaning is the target word has to be viewed within the social and cultural environment as well. 2. Fundamental processes of vocabulary acquisition. Another feature of vocabulary ability is the learner's knowledge of word characteristics, perceiving different forms of words, recognizing linguistic rules to decipher meaning, using context for guessing meaning, and even simply knowing the parts of speech to which words belong. 3. Metacognitive strategies. The third component of vocabulary ability is metacognitive strategies that all language users employ to manage communication. Second language learners often use metacognitive strategies to overcome their lack of vocabulary knowledge when they are communicating. Most often, they practice avoidance, such as using a lexical item because they don't know it or are not sure of the correct pronunciation or grammatical forms. Other times, second language learner will paraphrase a word, fall back on their first language, use a superordinate. This is a title or a category term such as musical instrument for trombone, or even appeal to authority when they are unsure of their knowledge of vocabulary. As we have defined vocabulary knowledge as a separate ability, our design of vocabulary test assert will be more discrete than embedded tests that contribute to assessing a larger construct or ability than just vocabulary. Let's look at some steps you can take to design a vocabulary test. 1. Clarify your purpose. You are already aware that the first order of business in designing tests is to clarify the purpose of the test so that we can evaluate the result in relation to the intended use of the test. For example, a test of vocabulary can be used to assess how many high-frequency words a learner already knows before he or she begins a course of study. During the course of study, a teacher can use vocabulary tests to assess learner progress or identify vocabulary that need further attention. And at the end of a course of study, the vocabulary test can provide information about the knowledge of lexical items a learner has studied. 2. Define your construct. Once we have clarified the intended purpose of the test, we must next define the construct or the ability we are about to measure. The construct definitions of vocabulary knowledge can be either syllabus-based or theory-based. For many of us, as teachers, the syllabus-based approach to defining the construct is more appropriate, whereas the theory-based construct definition is applicable for research and for assessing vocabulary proficiency. 3. Select your target words. Next, in designing a vocabulary test, it is important to consider the selection of target words. Consider the following categories for making your choices. Nations in 1990 suggest that teaching and testing of vocabulary should be based on the high-frequency words more often occurring, because these words are the basis for all proficient language users. Low-frequency words, less often occurring, are much less valuable, and often learners pick them up based on how widely they read, their personal interests, their educational background, the society they live in, and the communication they engage in. Another category is specialized vocabulary, which figures more prominently in content area instructions, and the assessment of these lexical items are more often found in subject matter tests than in general language tests. The last category is sub-technical words, which occur across register or subject area, and thus can be used to assess different meanings and definitions. 4. Determine mode of performance. In designing vocabulary tests, we must keep in mind two important features: receptive and productive vocabulary. We can receive and produce vocabulary in two ways. One is recognitions or comprehensions, whereby a learner is presented with a word and asked to show they know the meaning of that word. To have a better understanding of testing receptive and productive vocabulary, we need to clarify these terms. Regarding receptive vocabulary, it refers to words that a person can comprehend and respond to, even if the person cannot produce those words. In contrast, productive vocabulary refers to all the words known and used by a particular person. We may be able to recognize a word when we see or hear it, but are we able to use it in our speech or writing? The production of a word requires a different and perhaps more complex set of abilities from those needed for reception of a word. So, both modes of performance need to be taken into account in assessment. Designing assessment tasks for receptive vocabulary. Teachers often design vocabulary tests both to assess progress in vocabulary learning and to give learners feedback and encouragement to continue studying vocabulary. With classroom tests, practicality can be a significant concern, especially ease of construction and scoring. Thus, many vocabulary tests are limited to single sentences. In designing assessment tasks for receptive vocabulary, there are two important notes. First of all, it is important to consider what role the context plays in the test item. One function of the context is to indicate a specific meaning of a high-frequency word. Second, the learner must be able to recognize the word based on a given context. Example of tasks to test receptive vocabulary can be seen in those following exercise types. Vocabulary in a one-sentence context, high-frequency word. Vocabulary in a one-sentence context, low-frequency word. Another type of receptive vocabulary assessment is the well-known and widely used matching exercise. These types of recognition tasks require test taker to match the target word with its meaning or definition. In addition to assessing progress and giving feedback, teachers can also give vocabulary tests for proficiency purposes. In this case, the most common approach is to investigate a learner's vocabulary size. One frequently used test to assess a learner's vocabulary size is word association. The procedure involves presenting the target word as a stimulus to test taker and asking them to say the first word that comes to their mind. Designing assessment tasks, productive vocabulary. In the same way that context plays a key role in receptive vocabulary tasks, productive tasks which involve recall and use are also better performed within a context or a situation. A common test type for this is sentence completion, where the target vocabulary item is deleted from a sentence, and the test taker must understand the context in which the word occurs in order to produce the missing word. This methodology involves recall in that the test taker must provide a lexical item from memory. There are two ways to adapt this task type. 1. Fill in the blank exercise. 2. Selective deletion clause. In this selective deletion clause or gap fill test, the test taker must be able to identify not only the meaning, but also the forms of the lexical item that is needed to fill in the blank. Going beyond a single sentence, longer passages provide opportunities to assess other aspects of vocabulary knowledge. Thus, in addition to word meaning, the forms and use of a lexical item can be assessed. The selective deletion clause or gap fill test is one type of test that draws on these aspects of word knowledge. Here is an example of gap fill exercise. And here is an illustrated example of selective deletion clause task. It is important to remember that assessing grammars and vocabulary needs to be carefully understood in classroom context, especially within communicative methodologies. In both teaching and assessment, focus on form has an important role to play in helping students zoom in on the beat and pitch of the language they are learning. Of course, this zoom lens should not be overly utilized at the expense of authentic, appropriate, wide-angle views of language as a tool for communicating meanings in the real world. So, mini lectures 1 and 2 are best seen in the perspective of providing you with a further set of tools for assessment, those designed to examine the building blocks of language, which complement the tools that you use for assessing any or all of the 4 skills. This is the end of the second mini lectures in Module 3 on the topic of assessing vocabulary. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.